Put your hands together for Rob. Thanks.
Thanks very much. It's great to still be here. I think it was mentioned yesterday, but I am also a county councillor, so I'm an elected official in the county of Wellington where I live. And so I was elected last fall during the municipal elections, and so I decided to throw my name into the ring because I wanted to give back, but I also wanted to be able to hear at the rural level what was happening out there beyond what I hear as an employee of the Rural Ontario Institute. And in fact, our board of 12, there are 4 individuals who are county councillors, county or municipal council representatives on the board, not because that's what we look for, but because that's their way of giving back as well. And so they also are monitoring what's happening out there in rural Ontario from a different perspective. Finally, I am leaving after this session, or shortly after this session, because I have to get back to a county council meeting tomorrow, and I got an email yesterday from our clerk, and she said we're taking pictures tomorrow. So anybody wants to check out the website after tomorrow, you'll be able to see that I'm wearing the same outfit and the same shirt and everything, because I do fly into Toronto tomorrow at 6:16 in the morning and go directly to our county council meeting. So yeah, you know, you're looking at the better picture today, and we'll see it tomorrow. But that's the way it is. So our organization is, I think, providing an effective rural voice, albeit a small one, and albeit only a voice, not the voice. And we had to determine early on in the existence of ROI whether we wanted to be a voice or to advocate. And when you look at the definition of advocacy or advocate, it's a person who publicly supports or recommends a particular cause or policy. We ourselves, at the board level, the board determined that we needed to be cautious and that the organization didn't necessarily have the solution to all the rural challenges, but they potentially had a solution or some thoughts around a solution. We also, as I mentioned yesterday, we are a charitable organization as well, so we have to be careful how much we advocate. There's the 10% rule, or about 10%. And so if you do much more advocacy than 10% of the business that you're in, you can actually lose your charitable status. And we certainly didn't want to do that. And then as we looked at asset-based models of community development, it would suggest that it's less about policy change and more about social capital and the capacity building anyways. And that's also one of our mandates as an organization, is that whole capacity building in rural Ontario. Just like this province and all the provinces across the country, there's no single one rural Ontario. There's the agrarian countryside, there's near urban, that's the GTA area, the Greater Toronto area and the Hamilton area. There's the lakefront and cottage area, which is also rural, and then there's northern and remote. And certainly this diversity of ruralness in Ontario also adds to the diversity of perspectives on various solutions and priorities within regions. And so, because we're not a representative organization of each of these Ontario ruralities, we really didn't think we could be the single spokesperson for one message. And so what we do, though, is to make sure that folks understand that there are varying degrees of rurality in Ontario. Sorry about that, I thought they were all up there. So rural Ontario is certainly a diverse animal. 1 in 5, or 20% of all Ontarians live in rural Ontario or in non-metro areas. 1.4 million of those folks live in areas represented by under 10,000 in population, and then 1.1 million are in small towns between 10,000 and 100,000. That 100,000 mark is actually one of the definitions of rural in Ontario, and like we heard yesterday, there's a variety of rural definitions, but one of the definitions that the government uses is that a community is rural if it's less than 100,000 people. And so, you know, there you go. So most of our 1.1 million folks living in small towns in rural Ontario come from a collective of under 20,000 people. So lots of definition work there. As I mentioned yesterday, we provide a voice, and so I liken it to that amplification or that voice box. That's our role. We gather voices and perspectives and help to amplify the message. So we'll bring people together. You'll see that there's a number of people behind the ampliphone, and we'll allow their messages, we'll help their messages to be heard in a variety of ways and to a variety of stakeholders and people. Sometimes it's about inviting organizations and individuals to play a role in that megaphone piece, and inviting agencies and governments and other lawmakers and representatives to be in front of that megaphone to listen. And so that's our role, is bringing people together that can speak through that megaphone and bringing people together who can hear that at the other side. You've seen our mission and mandate. Certainly initiating dialogue, supporting collaboration, and promoting action is one of the phrases within our vision. We're helping to build an understanding of the various rural realities and the conditions and the trends. We're a credible, objective, nonpartisan, and trusted organization voice. That's our role. And I'll get into and I've talked a bit about them yesterday, but I'll get into them a little later about the examples there. We help to bridge or be a conduit to bringing people together rather than that advocacy role, which we actually just try to not use that word. We think we can do as much by getting the voice out than using the word advocacy in our province anyways. I mentioned the Focus on Rural Ontario fact sheets, and I did bring a sample here. So this is the 2014 edition. I'll leave this out front. Somebody can pick it up. It's there. I won't take it home with me. But certainly, it is a collection of fact sheets, 1- and 2-page fact sheets, and they're all available on our website, by the way, which are descriptive of socioeconomic trends that we're seeing. We've developed them in themed areas, and there's 33 titles that we put together over the last 2 years. Theme sets, things like income, migration, seniors, youth employment, population, demographics, and employment in general. We've done fact sheets in each of those areas. And so those go out to a number of stakeholders and are used out there. As I mentioned yesterday, we've followed up with media releases and worked with the media to promote them, compiled the set then, and this is what we send to our local members of parliament and make sure they know them. And we actually do get letters back saying these are very useful. But they also go to our stakeholders and many of our subscribers who will use them and when they're going out to talk to lawmakers and municipal representatives as well. So it helps them when they're doing delegations and writing and developing cases for funding and support. We don't do it, we provide them with the resource. I mentioned yesterday about our newcomer and youth community indicators. It's a data resource that enables communities of all sizes in Ontario to assess their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to attracting newcomers and attracting and keeping youth. So it is, we have developed this, and then we updated we were contracted to develop it, and then contracted again to update it. And it was funded by a provincial grant that we received. We engaged the services of staff from the Conference Board of Canada and StatsCan to put this together. And it is a tool now that resides on the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs website, which does allow municipalities to compare themselves against other communities in their same size and scale. And so it is being well used. We provide opportunities for guest blogs on our website, and we have 20 to 25 or 30 of those a year. We invite representatives to write a blog in which we will post. This one happens to be a rural nurse speaks out, and so her blog was on the whole changing face of the landscape of rural nursing and in support for healthcare in rural Ontario. We solicit these from our subscribers, from people we're talking to. If we're together with folks on an issue, we'll invite someone to develop a blog, and we will share that. And so once again, we're providing a voice to on an issue for others to participate in. We convene rural forums, and in 2013-14 we convened 9 rural forums on health and aging, youth out-migration, and rural transportation. We use the conclusions, ROI uses the conclusions that we gain from these forums. We'll write a white paper or a concluding report, and we'll use those to go to government and go to our representatives and go to others, other agencies and others, and say this is what we're hearing. So we're not saying ROI feels this way, we're saying here's what we're hearing in rural Ontario. And so those forums are held on a variety of issues and around the province, so we do think we're getting a representative message from our subscribers and the folks that we're trying to represent. We convene issues on a variety of forums, and we can't do it all. So we'll ask our board to help us identify what topics we should cover, and they very clearly indicated, again, I mentioned this yesterday, that we'll stick to topics that are big and hairy, that aren't sort of single focused, that another organization, another one issue organization might be involved in. And so that's why we get involved in things like the transportation issue or the rural health or others like that. We participate in policy submissions and writing briefs around policy, and the pupil accommodation review guidelines were recently changed in Ontario, or set to change, and the turnaround time for that was about 4 days, and we were able to submit a policy brief, a submission that indicated that here's what we felt as an organization and to the changes they were proposing. We've done similar ones on Ontario Immigration Strategy and the fund design for the Southwestern Economic Development Fund, rural and northern healthcare, modernizing childcare, and the new Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. So we take the time to consider these issues and how they might impact in rural Ontario. And I work with a wonderful man who is our policy and stakeholder engagement director, and he's the one that does the work in this side of our mandate. And Norm thinks well, thinks long, and then puts things together in a fashion that represents our organization and our board well. For the last number of years, we've also put together a series of election questions for for the various elections that have been held. So federal, provincial, and municipal, we will poll our subscribers and ask them, what's the type of questions would you like to hear from the parties or from individuals who are running? We will put together a series of 10 to 15 questions that are posted. We'll post the questions on the website so individuals can use them when they're talking or meeting with their local candidates, whether it be municipal, provincial, or federal. But we also send those same questions to the party leaders, and we ask for a response. And we will post their responses. We're nonpartisan. We will post all responses if we get them. And we don't often get all 3 parties or all the parties, provincial or federally, but we certainly do post what we receive, and in fact, it helps to lay out their platform as well. So that's an area that takes a bit of time during those election processes. So we'll soon be convening or sending out an email to our subscribers to ask them what would you like to hear as we lead up into the federal election, and then base a series of 10 to 15 questions that might be useful to be asked, whether it be at the local level of the parties that are running, individuals that are running, or at the federal level as well. We connect stakeholders with government, and one example, as I mentioned, was the Rural Ontario Summit that we held last year. It was a big deal. We invited, we were asked by the provincial government to organize and manage, within a 2.5-month time period, organize and manage a Rural Ontario Summit, where we were a third-party, credible, objective, trusted organization that they were able to work with, and we had a history with them. They knew we could, and we did get the job done. And so from the summit was held, and there was 250 people for a day-long summit. We had minister representation. We had the premier was connected by phone, and it was tweeted out. Social media was totally managed by outside parties that we contracted with, and it was a big deal. We trended. This event trended, whatever that means, I don't know. But we were trending that day. I think that's pretty cool. That's very cool. But the summit and the results led to a rural Ontario roadmap, which was then moved forward by the Liberal Party, and they developed their own red roadmap. But it has created, the summit was the start of a rural Ontario roadmap, which we're now just starting to dialogue with government about how can we play a further role in this rural Ontario roadmap over the next 3 years that this party will be in power before our next election. But we are a credible, trusted organization that they recognize is valuable to them. And so that's another way that the message is getting out there. We consider ourselves, in new words these days, consider ourselves a backbone organization for collective impact initiatives. And so for those big, hairy issues that I mentioned, we may play a role of helping to articulate the issue or the challenge or the opportunity, looking around the collective and deciding who should be at the table and who should be talking. We may go after funding for that initiative or that opportunity, and then we become accountable for getting something accomplished, whether it be an activity or being a host to something. But at the same time, we're building those networks, we're transferring knowledge, and we think we're influencing local action and policy and program development. And so we've heard that similar to what Brian said earlier, I think we're a solutions-oriented organization rather than a problem-solving. I think we're more solutions-oriented when we think of ourselves as a backbone organization around collective impact. And so the one example, I mentioned it yesterday, this was the Accelerating Rural Transportation Solutions. And so we put a proposal together, we got funding, we engaged others in a partnership for 10 months, and then they left. We engaged an advisory group to help us manage this program. We did 3 financial case studies across the province, which are being used. We did 10 case studies, and as a result, as I mentioned yesterday, 22 communities have received pilot funding for up to 3 years to develop their own rural transportation solutions. So that's just an example of where we might provide that backbone service. You've seen this slide before. We do provide and develop or offer webinars that connect the whole idea of capacity building, leadership, and community development. Again, that's different than advocacy and voice, where we're bringing the two ideas together. This takes time, this takes effort to coordinate, and we've realized that people don't, individuals and organizations just don't necessarily have a lot of money to spend on webinars. And so, do we make a lot of money here? No, we don't. We attempt to cover our costs, and sometimes that's even hard, but it is a lot of work. But at the same time, we think we're melding the two mandates of our organization, connecting leadership and community development together. Like many other organizations, we're struggling to measure the effectiveness of the rural voice. As we get funds, whether it be from a provincial government or from another funder, we're more and more being asked to define or outline the impact that we're having. And that's tough. That's tough when it comes to capacity building. That's tough when it comes to other activities that we're doing. We have to ask ourselves who's listening, and in the case of the one example, the Rural Ontario Summit, we had senior bureaucrats, we had senior ministers there and political staff. We think they were listening. We have played a consultative role with the Ontario Nonprofit Network, a fairly new organization representing 60,000 nonprofits in the province of Ontario. we're the only rural organization on that that's actively involved, and so we're sharing a rural perspective, and more we're being asked to share that perspective. We're recognized for providing a rural perspective by the media, both radio and in fact TVO, Television Ontario, TVO, has come to us 3 or 4 times asking for speakers, whether it be a board member or a staff member, talking about a rural perspective. And so we think that's special, and we're excited about that opportunity when we get those. The fact that we were invited by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to apply for a grant around some soft skill understanding around municipal politics recently, we think that there's people out there that recognize that we have a voice and we have something to offer. Our growth in subscriptions, subscribers, the hits on our website, the downloads of our various resources and things that are there, we can count those and we can see that they're increasing. So we do think we're having an effect there is effectiveness in the rural voice that we're trying to share. But at the same time, funders want hard numbers. Funders want, our funders anyways, want economic impact and want more than what we're able to give them. But when I ask, and it's usually me that asks, when I ask, well, tell us how you're doing it. They're not doing it, and I'm speaking specifically of our government. They're not doing it, and they have no idea how they do it if they did. So it's tough. I was telling someone earlier that we're still getting the same amount of money from the provincial government, but we're being asked to do a whole lot more, which at one time that supported some of our programming. Now we're being asked to do a whole lot more just to get that same amount, and it's tough, right? And so, but that's no different than what you're experiencing, and so we just do it, right? You just do it because you're passionate. Like Gordon, you're passionate about rural and rural community development. So with that, Gordon asked me the same questions as Brian mentioned, and so do you feel it's important to try and provide a rural perspective on policy development? Absolutely. Are we doing that? We're doing that in our small way. Do you feel that governments already have a good sense of rural issues and how to address them? No. In Ontario, no. We don't even have we have proposed to the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs an advisory council. And I'm going to see him next week, and I'm going to talk to him about the BC model, because I think it's good stuff. We proposed it with a number of ministers previously, and with a 4-year mandate, maybe the time is right. And so, our goal would be to be the secretariat looking after that that advisory group, again, to keep it at that third party level. So, are there specific examples you're aware of where governments have developed policies that have failed to understand the rural context? Yes. In Ontario, our case, I would say it centers around health and education and social services policies, and it has to do with distance. Again, no difference than here in the US. It has to do with distances between communities and the critical mass. And a one-size-fits-all. The one thing that the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs is doing now, and in the last 6 to 8 or 10 months, they've started working on what they call a rural lens, which they're sharing with all the other ministries, and that rural lens is something that essentially is being mandated that all ministries, when they're looking at policy development they have to take in mind that rural lens. I don't know much more about it than that. I hear about it. We haven't been asked to review it, but it sounds like it makes sense, and so that's good. Any suggestions or recommendations to groups who want to try to influence policy development? We've heard it, the last 2 speakers. It takes time, it takes effort, and I think at first you have to decide whether you're going to advocate or be the voice, and I think that's important. And then, as was mentioned earlier, prioritize and just drive on and attempt to make a difference. Thank you very much.